Who's got it better than us?
Your home for the best sports coverage in Utah. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben want to remind you, don't miss your chance to win big every week on the KSL Sports Zone. Listen all day on Wednesdays for your chance to win on Win Ticket Wednesday. Let's talk a little Big 12 basketball. Let's get out to the Zone phone now. He covers the Utes for KSLSports.com. He's our buddy Steve Bartle. What's going on, Steve?
What's up, fellas? How we doing?
I'm doing well, Steve. How have you, placed what happened last weekend and two of the better wins of the recent Utah basketball era happening within 72 hours of each other? How have you placed those two wins into the big picture of Utah basketball and all the conversations we know that are having are, is Craig Smith the right guy? Is this what the team's going to look like going forward? Is the NIL worth spending money on? Like all of these pieces.
Dude, it is such a fascinating conversation with Utah basketball right now because those two wins were pretty significant. And, it's interesting to think back on the conversations being had last week prior to the wins and how it seemed like Utah was, certainly headed toward a change, perhaps, and that, Craig Smith's seat was warming. And yet he gets these two big wins over Kansas and Kansas State, in the fashion that he did on a short turnaround. I think it says a lot still that he has the buy-in from the players. And because, when you talk about guys, coaches on the hot seat, right, you're typically seeing signs and indications from players that things aren't going well. And, whether it be body language, whether it be just poor effort, you're not seeing those signs with Utah players. And so I think that really says a lot of what Craig Smith and his staff have done to kind of keep that buy-in, to maintain that buy-in, despite the struggles that they've had this season. And, I think it certainly has sort of impacted at least the conversations and the potential for Utah basketball under Craig. I think it's we all know, in the Big 12, the cost to compete in terms of NIL that's being invested in these programs is remarkably high, right? BYU investing $7 million in AJ DeBantia and that, and then you've got Coleman Hawkins at Kansas State getting $2 million alone, and we know that Utah's total NIL budget is somewhere between $2 and $3 million altogether, right? And so Utah is facing an uphill battle in the sense that Craig Smith hasn't gotten the same amount of investment that a lot of these other programs have. But, he's still finding ways to win. And he himself and his team, it's been an adjustment. And watching this team over the last couple of years competing in the Pac-12 compared to the brand of basketball that's played in the Big 12, it is different. It is noticeably different. And I think Utah has had to learn how to just the level that they have to play at to compete in this league. And I think they've started to, hit their stride. Now it's about, can you carry this momentum that you have at home? Can you carry it on the road this weekend against UCF? I think this game in particular has a lot of potential to, in regards to Utah basketball's future with Craig Smith and that sort of thing. I think this upcoming weekend is vital for Craig Smith and Utah basketball if they can parlay this momentum that they've generated at home and carry it on the road down to Orlando.
Interesting to hear you lay out, approximate, of course, NIL figures. I'm curious, Steve, the resources that Utah would need to compete, at a high level in Big 12 basketball, are those simply not there, or are they going to a different sport? What a great question. I think the focus has been
more so on Utah. But that's not to say that there couldn't be more funds for basketball. I think that there is the potential for the resources to increase without impacting football and other sports. I think there's been a little hesitancy from what I've gathered to invest a lot of resources because it's been unclear whether Craig could be the guy to lead Utah into the Big 12. And so that's why I think, for Craig, finishing strong is vital to his future at Utah, this season, because I do think there is potential for the resources around him to grow with, like I said, without taking away from other sports and all of that. So I think Utah has room to grow their resources and grow the budget a little bit.
Do you get the impression, I'm not trying to just ask the same question over and over, that there is a symbiotic relationship between the athletic director and the head coach in basketball at Utah?
Oh, man, what a great question. I think that there's a good understanding of where they're at, but it is you can't help but notice, we take so much from social media and the interactions and tweets and stuff that we see on there. And I think, you can probably draw some conclusions from the fact that Mark Harlan has not been very vocal in his support, I guess, of the Utah basketball program in comparison to some of the other things that he tweets about with Utah athletics. Now, maybe I'm just drawing something out of thin air there. I don't know. I haven't talked to Mark about it. I haven't heard anything specifically regarding the relationship. But you can't help but wonder with the lack of tweets, I guess, to keep it simple, that there might be some friction there. I don't know. I think but it is, you can't help but wonder just with the fact that, the women's basketball program went down to Tempe. They knock off Arizona State in big fashion. They travel home and they show up at the men's basketball game. And Mark tweets out recognizing the women's basketball program. Meanwhile, the men's basketball program itself just knocked off number 17 Kansas, and not a peep about the program. He had it on a silver platter to at least acknowledge what Craig Smith and Utah basketball has accomplished, and there was nothing. And I think the radio silence is something that fans have caught on to, and I think it's there's certainly, I don't know if it's concern is the right word, but certainly there's curiosity and wonder about what is going on with Mark Harlan and the men's basketball program and Craig Smith in particular.
So, with that in mind, if Craig were to pull a Lou Brown from Major League, where he's like, every time we win, we peel a section, you know what I mean, to kind of stick it to him, like keep it going after these two big wins, what would that look like? I mean, if they really showed out at the end of the year and in the conference tournament, what would that look like?
With what?
How many wins? There's certain games in this league that you're just not going to win. I mean, Utah, there's not a chance that they win out. But if if Craig Smith made a statement, what would that look like?
Yeah, I think, with what he's got coming up. So he's going on the road to UCF, and then the program will travel to Tucson, which is just a wild road swing going from Orlando to Arizona. And then he'll come back home. Utah will come back home. They've got Arizona State, West Virginia, and then they finish up down in Provo. I think Utah has to go 3-2 at minimum, to kind of be in a pretty positive place. And then you get into the Big 12 tournament, and the seedings with the Big 12 tournament is going to be, pretty fascinating. Who ends up 8, 9, 10, 11, I think is going to be really, really interesting because, you look at some of the matchups and jockeying for position and trying to find the best path forward in the Big 12 tournament. That's going to be really interesting to see how that all shakes out because you probably want to avoid Houston in that number one spot. It's not to say that it's Houston and then there's a big drop off to Iowa State and Texas Tech and those programs, but Houston just looks like a totally different beast than everybody else. But I do think Craig's got to find a way to go 3-2, which means he's going to have to get a road win against one of UCF, Arizona, and BYU. If he can go 3-2 and then get into the Big 12 tournament, potentially, get that first round win if that's what they have to do, if they have to play that first day. If they get a bye, that's a huge accomplishment from what we were thinking Utah could be. Even me, who I was optimistic Utah would end up 10, 11, 12. If they end up, in that 8 spot, maybe even 7 spot, which isn't out of the realm of possibility with Kansas in free fall, if they end up in one of those 2 spots, to get a bye in the Big 12 tournament is a big accomplishment for the program. So, like I said, I think they've got to go at minimum 3-2 to kind of really help things moving forward.
Could you see a situation next year, Steve, where Utah is again, not lame duck is the wrong word completely, but has another a prove it year, which I think this was a prove it year for Craig Smith. If he does enough to stick around next season, do you think, are they comfortable having one more year of just saying we don't know if you're the guy or not, or do you think they want to have a more concrete decision this offseason?
I think for the health of the program, you want to have a decision on Craig's future with the program made after this year. I don't think you want to go into another year with this, but with college athletics and with the boosters, they're always going to have their opinions, and I think there's always going to be that wonder of what an Alex Jensen or what an Andre Miller could mean for the program, and so that's always going to be something that will, I don't want to say hang over the program, but it will always be in the back of everybody's thought process. So I think, Utah, you would like to have a decision made after this season and move forward with that just being in place. And this is our guy. And I think Craig has shown that he can compete. He can lead a team in the Big 12. I think Craig has been wise to, take an open mind to this season in learning and developing as a coach. I think that's been that has to continue moving forward if he is going to be the guy. But we'll see. But I think Utah would, for the health of the program, you've got to make a decision and move forward with it.
It seems like switching football real quick, Steve. It seems like a trend in college football is going to be doing away with the spring game because you don't want to showcase players for transfer or something. But Mark Harlan was on the station yesterday on Hanson Scotty and said they are planning on holding a spring game. Are we going to see spring football change, and are we going to see any of that this year?
Yeah, I think we are going to see it. I don't know that Utah's, they're still going to have the spring game. There's that 22 forever game, with what that means for, that scholarship fund, all of the funds going to that. I think that's still something that's important. I think, they're probably going to have to rethink some things moving forward, but I think ultimately with the way that college football is trending more and more towards a professional model, that spring ball is going to turn into, these OTAs where you're just getting into practice and that's it. And I think that's where college football is headed, is to more of a professional model where you're not putting yourself at risk in a spring game. And, it wasn't too long ago that we were talking about FBS programs scheduling spring games with FCS competition and doing that. And I think, while that would still make a lot of sense for programs, I just don't think with the money that's being invested in these players now that it's going to be something that everybody is going to be looking forward to doing. So I think we're heading towards this becoming more OTA style, and that's where this is headed.
Steve, we appreciate you and all of your fine work. Thanks for jumping on with us.
Appreciate you guys.